The Cozy Earth Mother's Day sale is here. Their incredible bedding and loungewear is mind-blowingly satisfying to touch, and it is sourced from bamboo, and it's good for the planet, free from toxins, it gets softer with every single wash, and it's naturally temperature regulating. My mum approves, and yours will too. Listeners get 35% off any order at cozyearth.com using code GROWTH.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sam Harris, and it is my true honour and pleasure to host you here on the Growth Mindset podcast. I talk to amazing individuals about how they achieve their dreams and break down the strategies it takes to lead explosive tech businesses to being paid to travel the world. I deep dive into topics such as Bitcoin and fintech, or just how to get stuff done, with the goal of increasing our own collective wisdom and making us all happier, healthier and wealthier. Who doesn't want that? Today, we have an old guest on the podcast, backed by popular demand. And by that, I mean that I just really loved my first podcast with him so much, and it's probably one of my favourite podcasts so far to really listen to. So I demanded a second. We have a specific topic of discussion, which is the worldwide and mostly hidden phenomenon that are rainbow gatherings. So these gatherings are a month long, and they follow the full moon cycle from new moon to new moon. And they happen, as I said, all over the world. It's basically a camp that is set up in beautiful rural areas, usually a forest, where participants live and camp in the wild without technology, taking a few steps back to basics. The attendees gather into a collection of people known as the family, and anyone is allowed to join the family free of charge for as long as they want. So breakfast and dinner is provided, which is the main social event of the day, where you all come together to eat and be happy. Announcements such as workshops that can be attended, or fun things to do like games and hiking, or matters of importance like logistics, etc., they all get made at the meal times. So, as I said, there is no technology allowed, so you can't use your phone or laptop or Google or watch TV or even listen to the radio. You're allowed to use a Kindle for books, and anything in your own tent is completely legit. So if you do have music or iPad or laptop you want to use, you can do that by yourself, but you might struggle to find a charger. So the gatherings attract a really wide variety of people, from musicians and comedians to artists and magicians and all kinds of crazy stuff. And all these people, they put on workshops and skill sharing sessions, so there's lots to learn. A lot of people ask me afterwards what the hell you do without TV or a phone or work to do, but amazingly your time fills up really quickly in just this relaxed and loving environments, because there's just so much to do and learn, and you just run around all day having very real and raw and just like pure fun. And so yeah, I had a really special time at the event that I went to in Tasmania, and I just wanted to explain the basic premise behind how a rainbow gathering works before the episode, so that you all understand what we are talking about. So the rest of what we learned at a rainbow gathering and how it made us feel and fun stories will all be in the actual interview. So on that note, let's get to it. Hello Felix, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Sam.
It's great to have you back. I really appreciated our first conversation. Listening back to that, I felt I learned a lot that I hadn't really realised, and I've really appreciated the last month hanging out with you more, just the whole general feeling. The idea that you are the result of your 5 friends that you spend the most time with is a theory. I feel like you should be one of those people that I spend more time with because I want to have that aspect of you.
Oh, so that's flattering. That's the goal.
It's nice to have like a little Felix on my shoulder telling me this is what Felix would do kind of thing, and then like the sensible person somewhere else. Not that you're not sensible, but you know what I mean. You're like, maybe you could chill out a bit more and just be happy right now, Sam. So anyway, you have since inspired me to go to a rainbow gathering, which I doubt anyone has ever heard of before. So I wanted to talk to you about that.
Well, there's probably a bunch of people that have heard about it, but they're of a more specific, particular subculture around the world. But after having gone to one, you're in a little bubble, and it seems like everyone holds those ideologies and is of that subculture.
Yeah.
But then you often step back and you realise that actually, in contrast, most of developed society has no interest in such things, which is why I think, yes, it's a pretty interesting niche experience and thing to talk about.
Yeah, I guess it also feels a bit like you know people on a completely different level, but it's something you can't really talk about with other people outside of it.
It's pretty hard to explain. You get
Yeah.
pretty funny reactions trying to describe it. So where does one begin to describe what it is? What did I first tell you about when I proposed that you ought to come to one?
So you first told me basically it's a bunch of hippies in the woods eating vegetarian food, running around all day having fun, and there's no technology.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. A little bit worried as to what I'd do all day and if I get frustrated.
Yeah.
But
It's probably a pretty opposite environment from a lot of what you've espoused and talked about in a lot of your podcasts with a bunch of being effective and making a bunch of changes through technology. It's quite the other end of the spectrum of potential changes and experiences of different lifestyles.
Definitely.
My first description I had of it from a girl I knew was that we go to the forest and we have a lot of ceremony according to the moon, and I thought that sounded pretty gay, and so I was definitely not going to go to one. Then a number of years ago I ended up going to one in the middle of Borneo because I had a number of friends I liked and I thought I can at least hang out with them if everyone else is too weird and out there.
Yeah.
So we trekked across Indonesia and made it to the middle of Borneo where the traditional Dayak people live. And then we lived in the forest with a couple hundred people from all around the world and cooked and ate communally, and with everyone volunteering to put money in a hat, do cooking, do shopping in the local village. And we also did a bunch of gathering of jackfruits and coconuts and other things available in the forest. And otherwise, the only other responsibility is to dig a hole for everyone to shit in. And then the rest of the time is free for whatever you please in the forest, which when you bring that up to a lot of people, their reaction a number of times to me has been instantly, but what will you do? There is no internet.
Yeah.
Which for a lot of people, the time ends up consisting of adventuring in nature, singing, a lot of music, really talented musicians, exercise, reading, yoga, whatever other eccentric thing, which there's a lot of. And then, the cooking and eating together and enjoying the simple life. And now it's a tradition, I'd say tradition is the most accurate adjective, since the 60s when rainbow gatherings started in America. And since then they've spread all around the world and they're still going. So one can find a rainbow gathering in any continent in the world, just about. And in America, they get up to, I think, 20,000 people. So that means that 20,000 people, sort of through anarchy, without a central organizer, agree on a place in nature, usually far away from much development, and come together and stay in the forest for a moon cycle, which is a month, usually traditionally. And there'll be 20,000 people in the forest living in anarchy with no tickets, no leaders, no rules, only with the traditions keeping them together of how resources are pooled and used. And so every job or every responsibility happens through what would best be described as anarchy, with people volunteering or stepping up to whatever it is, ranging from going around the circle after dinner with a hat to collect donations, to driving a car to the nearest farm or shop for food, to cooking, to cleaning, to talking about any other issues, any other concerns that are happening in that gathering.
Yeah, and also running workshops.
A lot of workshops, so there'll be the breakfast and dinner circle usually. People volunteer to cook, everyone sings together and then eats together, and then people will announce anything they want, which often includes skills sharing and workshops of all natures.
Yeah, I was really surprised by the amount of different skills you can learn just from a bunch of other people. Having lived on the internet for the last 10 years, you should have...
That's a big contrast.
That's how you get your skills.
Which I think was highlighted by your business partner, Andreas, when I talked to him, and he really enjoyed it. But he said he wouldn't mind having some other things he could learn or other activities he could still do which required the internet. And I asked him, well, what are they? And he said, well, he'd like to research things. If it was... One of the things he mentioned was how to make a pizza oven out of clay. Or, how would we... For me, it would be learning music. But then if you think pragmatically about a lot of these things, well, there's a bunch of hippies in the forest. They know very well how to make pizza ovens out of clay. Or, they were master musicians, and I was getting one-on-one master musician tutoring, which is much better than doing it on YouTube. But depends what you want to do. But for a lot of the basic things, whether you want a yoga teacher or a music teacher, or learn acro yoga or any number of things, it's a very good environment to do so.
Yeah, and it was surprising that it wasn't just complete hippies as you'd think.
Hippie's a pretty broad term, I think.
Yeah, as in like Helen was thinking of coming, and she was like, "Oh, I'm just worried it's going to be hippies talking about like
I was
boiling
worried the first
lentils
time.
and stuff."
As I mentioned, I was worried they were
Yeah.
doing ceremonies according to the moon, but you do get a bit of everyone.
Mm.
And yes, there is a leaning towards left-wing political ideologies and saving the trees and smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
But you get a bit of everyone, and
But there are some like highly educated people there that actually are willing to share.
absolutely nothing
their
of
knowledge on stuff.
the personality genre of hippie. You're getting a certain type of them. The ones that are not too adventurous, not too social, and just want to sit around at home smoking bongs or whatever, they don't make it out of their house and go to the middle of the forest on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
You have to be more social, and you have to be more willing to have less physical comforts, i.e. living in a tent and not consuming your own ice cream out of the freezer. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a separator that only some people end up coming.
But I think there were quite a few. Well, there's a lot of completely new people there that wouldn't really identify themselves as hippies,
Absolutely.
but were open to the experience of living in a tent and seeing what the hell would happen without the internet and just having the full day.
I
to
think
see
the
things.
great thing, it just transforms so much if everyone already doesn't have their mobile phone. I mean, most people can't actually imagine how social dynamics change if you've got a few hundred people hanging out for a month with minimum responsibilities or hassles without digital distracting communication or work of normal nature. And to what degree, the question comes up, to what degree can they enjoy the simplest things together, from singing to dancing together to cooking together, learning skills.
Yeah, it's kind of strange to explain, but you just spend the whole day feeling very content.
Very content.
Everyone you meet has time for you and looks you in the eye.
That's
and
it, it's so
will
different.
give you a hug. And
So different. And I love the effortlessness in which you organise
yeah,
any given activity. You know, in the city, we'll plan Saturday night, we're going to go out to somewhere with nice music, and we might have a jam and have a dance or whatever activity you might want to do, but it happens so organically in Rainbow.
yeah, you're just wandering around with your car.
It's
guitar on your
everyone
back
yells out
and-
food circle when it's time to eat, so everyone will slowly walk over the mountains and come together in a circle. And then after that, everyone's announced all the workshops that there'll be. And it's just such an abundance of good activities. Over there, someone's playing frisbee. Over there's people teaching music, and over there teaching yoga. Or there's the river down there to swim in. And at least as far as my interests are concerned, when I'm usually in any city, I'm trying to find the park. I'm trying to find the swimming pool. I'm finding a place to work out, to do music, to find social connection. And all those things are just on tap within a few hundred meters non-stop. And it just seems very logical that I've got everything I want there. And I also, at the same time, learnt to be more comfortable with less personal physical comforts. And the food's healthy and diverse. And so I really feel like I'm not missing much in the city when I'm there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I guess one thing I really felt that I wasn't expecting was I felt very much like a child, but almost better, because you don't really have any worries as such when you're there, and you can kind of just do what you like with your day, and stuff gets sorted out, like food and things. So you don't really have to worry about if you've sorted something or like planned anything with
There's
anyone.
no need to plan or keep
Yeah,
track of
you don't
time.
have to-
Time, perception of time
time and
becomes
stuff.
totally different. No one knows what day of the week it is or how long you've been there, and because you're just not constantly making references to what you have to do at 5 p.m. or by tomorrow or anything.
Yeah.
All we know is food circle will happen. We're going
Yeah.
to eat twice a day, and in the meantime, get totally engrossed and meditative in
And you just
whatever
get
activity,
lost in playing your game
whatever
or
activity
learning.
you're doing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it transforms your psychology so much, having that different perception of time. And you can become so much more engrossed in any given thing you want to do without having this reserve in the back of your mind about how long have I done this, what else do I need to do?
Definitely. And then the other benefit I think that made it better than being a child was that no one really has any of the social pressury elements. There's no like bullying or like snide remarks or trying to make themselves look cool. Everyone's just there and being happy that everyone else is there. And
It's very minimal like
there's
that.
no
I wouldn't say
judgments.
there's none. There's still egos.
Yeah, there is
Egos
a
exist
bit.
in various subtle ways, but
it's a lot more mature.
very much done away
nicer
with
way.
judgmentalism and
Yeah.
social economic status, because there's every sort of freak and degenerate as well of normal society, and in every way people are practicing to be comfortable with nudity or whether you're singing or dancing or whatever it is, it just becomes so normal that no one gives a stuff.
Yeah.
Whether a man's wearing a dress or whether you're naked, or it just becomes so normal. So all that melts down, any judgment, and along with all the pooling of economic resources there, which is simple, just food, there's then no separation. There's no worth in judging people by their clothes or by the way they act or talk. And I've also noticed how in that different environment, my judgments often weren't very accurate. Just could because you're thrown together with 100 people from around the world in the middle of the forest. Normally in mainstream society, you could judge someone's physical appearance or some act they do or something, and you just choose, I'm not hanging out with them. I'm not hanging out with an effing dreadlock person smoking marijuana who has a kid with bare feet, You just ignore them. But you're in this close contact, so you end up hopefully finding the best in each person. And I'd end up being surprised when you try and keyhole someone and you say they're complete degenerate or whatever it is, but everyone's got their strengths. And it's, whether it was the old dreadlock, dirty looking guy who beat me at chess or the other guy who, the dirty bong smoking parents who were amazing musicians, it's actually not logical to conclude that some people are just bad at everything. We're really diverse, and that environment forced me to go beyond my judgments and hopefully see the good sides or the great capacities in all sorts of different people.
Yeah. How else would you say Rainbow changed you?
Well, the relevant question that comes up, a lot of people talk about, does this really transform the world? Does it really save nature? Or, are we just escaping? Another relevant question we'll come back to. Are we just escaping mainstream society? And I think for a lot of people, even though you do go back to the city, and for most people they don't form a permanent community, live that lifestyle, it can bring a lot of people back to appreciating the simple and important things in their life, such as human connection and nature and music and exercise, and hopefully do away with more of the less fulfilling distractions. So that was relevant to me, and I became more comfortable with less individual physical comforts, including the need for personal autonomous consumerism. I'm more happy to just eat whatever the other 100 people are eating. It's going to be healthy. I don't need to have that experience of going in 7-Eleven and choosing that I want the blueberry one with the chocolate one with the whatever, and finding a lot more value in the small things done around you having been done with willing intent. People cooking in the kitchen because they wanted to. Other people playing music in the kitchen for the cooks because they wanted to. These things often don't become a chore when you're not doing them 60 hours a week. Whatever it is, the person who dug the pit to take a shit in, they chose to do it. No one had to do it. It creates a very different dynamic from when you buy things from the 7-Eleven and the person's there because they want their effing wages. And so I came to appreciate that a lot more. Or even with music, when someone's not being paid to perform, there's the most amazing musicians in the world there, and that's their environment. Stuff. They want to play for you, and it feels so different.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount of talent, and it brings out in you as well. This sort of, it inspires you, like, oh shit, anyone can do this.
Anyone can do.
Spend a few hours a day working on this.
Yes, which again, do you want to appreciate those simple things, or do we want to work towards other more complex, autonomous, big system things?
Do you have any difficulties with coming back to reality afterwards?
Used to be more so, as with travelling or any new experience very generally, but now I've been to 6 of these 1-month retreats in the forest, and now it becomes very comfortable. We got used to getting straight back on your smartphone and getting the train across the city and taking back on your responsibilities and your time frame. So it's pretty smooth now, but you certainly notice the different interactions just going back into town and go to the supermarket or any other business, and just the people are overwhelmed by so much overstimulation and people all around them. They don't have that mental space to, as in Rainbow, just meet someone and you could sit down for 1 hour on the ground and talk about something important. In contrast, it can just seem so cold and busy and dehumanizing in a way, which in many respects, I think for all of our history, our ancestors did live in smaller tribes where they had the time of day and were connected with all the people around them. So in many respects, it's very dehumanizing, the connections or lack of connections that people have in big cities together now, and it can bring you back to realizing that.
Yeah, definitely. You just felt so much more like everyone else is in their own world and you're just sort of there in your own tiny world, but you feel like you're sort of looking around, experiencing it, and everyone's just shut off, and you're like, what? This isn't right. People should be talking to each other or something. And then the guy next to you gets out some chocolate and just eats it by himself, and you're like, why isn't he sharing? And what's going on? This isn't right. And it's kind of weird, and it's very sort of 1984 almost feeling when you get back to modern society and everyone's just sort of stuck in their process, going to their next thing, and no one's talking to each other, and it feels like we're all just these robots stuck in our tech that is controlling our lives. And you're like, shit, guys, you got it all wrong. Just be happy and talk to everyone that's around you. And it's kind of funny.
Yeah. And then one of the relevant questions that come up is, to what degree does anarchy, I don't use that in the context or in the modern use of the word as something just being disorganized or wrecked, but rather as it traditionally was used as a political system or ideology, as in Spain in the Civil War, as a system in which there's no leader or hierarchy and things are meant to happen through people choosing to take responsibility for things, i.e. volunteering. And the relevant question comes up, to what degree does anarchy work? To what degree does it function? And in my experience from going to these things, and also I guess going to the Occupy movements and umbrella protest in Hong Kong, it depends on two things: the number of people, one, in the community, and number two, the degree of complexity in the economic outputs or achievements or goals they want to produce. So if we're building 30-story skyscrapers and we want to have a fire department and a legal system and everything, then you need specialists and you need lots of people, and then anarchy basically doesn't work in my experience, because who wants to dedicate themselves to cleaning the sewage system or whatever, and just volunteer to be a specialist of that, and who's going to reward them? Whereas when the outputs are limited to such simple, relatively enjoyable things as digging a hole and cooking food together and playing music for the chefs, and we've only got 150 people, there's the different social dynamic that everyone knows each other. So everyone's more aware of if someone's doing nothing, and everyone feels more value in putting in. It's not someone working in a factory across the world to send something to you on eBay. I mean, he doesn't give a crap. Whereas someone that's digging a hole or cooking dinner for people that they know intimately feel a lot more value, and that's totally natural. And then every time they see the food they cooked is appreciated by all the people around them who are happy and grateful. And if you're washing the dishes after, it's for those people all around you, and you keep seeing them, and the same people you share knowledge with about yoga or whatever it is, and dance together and sing together. And these are all fundamental bonding things that if you're also working with and towards the interests of those people that you share those other experiences with, it gains a lot more meaning.
Definitely. Cool. Any other important things about rainbow gatherings that you think people should understand or commonly misunderstand?
Say it's just a very different experience, and I'd encourage anyone to give it a go. They're easy to find on the internet, and you can always go in for one day, and if one doesn't enjoy it, you can leave. But as with a lot of people, you being exception, and Andreas, it can be quite confronting and challenging, because I think a lot of the ideologies and presumptions you have to make to fit into a modern big city society are very challenged by being in there. And so I found myself thinking in really negative, critical ways when I first went in. And so for a lot of people, if it's challenging, I'd also recommend giving it a go for a while. And there's no need to be critical of simple ceremony. I mean, even for me, for everyone to sing together before eating, I'd never got into that, so I didn't enjoy it. But, our ancestors did do it together forever as a common thread for bringing people together and getting high and spiritual practice forever. And it's not that outlandish or, out there really for humans to sing together. Monkeys, I mean, everyone did it together. Or to really dance around a fire to drums. So I think a lot of people would find that if they gave it a go for a bit longer and were a bit open-minded, probably reconnect with a lot of these pretty universally objective historical practices and enjoy them.
And certainly if you're listening to the Growth Mindset podcast because you want to explore your outlook on things, then it's a great way to see alternative ways of living and a different way of just perceiving life around you.
Particularly for traveling, it's just another example that if anyone was to tell you, we couldn't afford to go to Japan for 2 months, what on earth did you do there? How did you get by? Well, it's a great, when you start in a new continent or new country, just go straight there and straight to the rainbow. I didn't have much money when I went to Japan for 3 months to learn Japanese. I went for 2 months to Rainbow and stayed on one mountain and put a couple of dollars a day into the hat and lived amongst almost all Japanese people, having this amazing experience speaking Japanese all day. And
by the end, you've got a bunch of mates.
And in the end, furthermore, having your cake and eating it too. I went to Tokyo and I wanted to be there for about 1 day. And in the end, I'm not just escaping, the costs of Tokyo or something. There's nowhere I'd prefer to be than intimately connected with people in nature, doing the things I love. I didn't want to be in Tokyo in contrast. It's like, it costs nothing, we're living simple, and it's everything I ever wanted.
Much less stress.
But, for anyone to get away, if you say you can't travel and have different experiences due to financial restrictions, go to a rainbow. 1 month, costs $0.
Yeah, and you don't get judged if you don't put money in.
Not at all. That's the beauty of it.
Definitely. Okay, cool. So linked to that is the concept of polyamory that came up at Rainbow and more increasingly in your life, you've said, in our personal conversations. So I wanted to explore that a bit.
Yeah, so particularly, as you typically expect within that sort of subculture, there's more polyamory and polygamy, I guess. And it's really quite unique compared to going around the world and any culture you might go to. It's pretty unique and different, even with nudity. Nudity is very acceptable and common, and that's so different. And so all sorts of sexual mores are quite different. And it's unique as well that everyone's in, just a one-off place for sort of a month. But there's also a bunch of workshops that end up getting run, people talking about monogamy and polygamy. And I guess there's all the common threads that you might hear about, the concerns and issues with people talking about such things. And I think one important aspect depends very much what environment you're in.
Yeah.
In terms of how much you could embrace either sort of approach to sexuality. And, if you're in some very judgmental, conservative middle of Pakistan, then I think it affects people's emotions a lot. As with homosexuality or anything, you go back through time, and apparently ancient Greece or ancient Rome, everyone was homosexual, and we're very much influenced by the culture around us. And so it's relatively more normal and acceptable. I feel as well even with sort of less sexist, it's so ultra-liberal in Rainbow that there's also less judgment or looking down on women who are more promiscuous or expressive, as with homosexuals or any other preference.
Definitely.
So people can get a fresh perspective and I think be accepted more to explore whatever they want.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice concept of not judging, to let people just try out different ways of defining themselves.
Yeah, and it also is relevant to the rather romantic anthropological philosophies or historical leanings towards espousing or promoting that a lot of hunter-gatherer tribes were polygamous, which I've read all sorts of history and anthropology books claiming different things, and it becomes very rhetorical, especially relevant to capitalist versus communist systems and potential criticisms of patriarchal societies. So I'm not going to offer some conclusion as to whether hunter-gatherers were polygamous or not, or how much they did have marriages. But, the idea would go that once people are sharing all resources and we didn't have fixed assets that people could hoard and we hunted and gathered together and shared food, then it would maybe radically transform sexual mores, because you don't have your own kid that you have to know is yours that has to inherit the farm.
Definitely.
Rather, when a kid gets produced in a potentially polyamorous hunter-gatherer society of a small number of people, the child is everyone's, and people potentially didn't know who their fathers were, which is really interesting. Anyway, relevant to Rainbow.
Yeah, there was.
If people are sharing resources and don't have their own private space, I think there's less concern about, the sharing of financial assets with partners, along with less judgments and concern with social economic status.
Yeah, it was also really nice for families that were there. Like, the parents would quite happily go to a workshop or do something and just leave their kids to play with other people, and there was a lot of sharing of
and so there's so many
that.
people all around that would love a short play with kids. I didn't want to babysit them 50 hours a week, but I loved having little plays with kids, and it's a friendly environment, and there's always food. So even in one Rainbow in Japan, I remember a mother left to Finland for 3 weeks and left her 6-year-old kid running around with all the other kids, with the family, with food provided. And that was sort of an extreme, but it's great for parents, and it's great sorts of...
I mean, also because the kid has no internet, so you're never going to know what he's up to or to talk to
there's
him.
not much junk food. He's got food. But it's interesting with parenting, there's all sorts of liberal, new, open-minded arrangements. One such example was a couple I'm friends with who had met when they were working in a refugee camp in Burma for 3 years, and the mother had asked the other guy if she would be a sperm donor, but not necessarily play any role as a father. And he agreed, and then many years later, he wanted to see his kid, and so there they were in Rainbow, and and then another couple I saw had the 3-month-old baby there this year, and I'd met them the previous year, when it would make sense that they'd conceived at that time. And it was interesting to think that Rainbow is sort of one of the most freedom and exploring things I'd like to maintain in my life, and they just made it look so easy. 1 year later, there they are with the 3-month-old playing music performances with the baby around their neck, and it just looked that easy.
Wow. So do you think Rainbow made you want to have kids anymore?
Not overall any more or less, but it's just one good environment where you've got all the kids hanging out together, and it is a great space for parents and kids. And a space and culture that can foster more liberal, open-minded thinking about arrangements of parenting. And again, I think we're so much influenced by the people and culture around us. And if you have friends that are accepting and taking on such new age practices as well, it all of a sudden becomes so much more possible and emotionally practical.
Cool. Yeah, what would be your views on having kids otherwise?
It could be good. It could be good to be free as well and not complicate things. But I think the really important thing overall is I end up talking to a bunch of people who didn't have kids and are really negative about it and missed out, and other ones who go, well, they were shits and it was boring and who gives a stuff either way.
Yeah.
I think the important thing in the end is whichever boat you end up in to just make the most of it and don't be regretful.
Yeah, definitely.
Be positive either way. They're both great.
Yeah, I think that's really important, just attitude to life in general.
And then you see the other
That's
old
always good,
people that didn't have kids that are perfectly happy and it's all good. And so it's up to you if you want to be seeing the grass is greener. And
Confusing one. Back to polyamory. You said you first met a couple in Indonesia, I think, and they were polyamorous. You were staying with them.
yeah, that was worth referencing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd been travelling with one girl and she'd met this other couple living in Bali and they were quite intent on swinging, which didn't end up happening. But we went and stayed with them and they were regularly nudists and they'd talk about all sorts of group sexual encounters over the dinner table with us very casually. They'd been married for 15 years, had 2 kids there and had businesses all over the world and they were quite happily in love.
Wow.
And it was quite confronting. I hadn't encountered too much of that attitude before, and later when I had a beer alone with the dad, I said, don't you ever get jealous or possessive? And he said, he's human, he gets a little bit, but if you really loved someone, you would enjoy for them to enjoy whatever they enjoy, even if that included for him his wife being with 7 men at once. And B, if you knew you had a deeper connection and relationship with someone, then you wouldn't be insecure about them just having sex with someone else, which I think would very much explain why some people that have a shallow relationship can be very insecure if their partner was to sleep with someone else, because then they can be easily 100% replaced if the relationship... Anyway, it sort of made a lot of sense and it was pretty interesting just to see some people, doesn't work for everyone, that can potentially, seem pretty happy and fulfilled and not too insecure or anything. So it got me thinking.
So that got you into trying polyamory then?
I was travelling a lot at the time and sort of already into being honest with any partners about, if I was going travelling and not, committing necessarily. But I guess just slowly through, rainbow in these environments, could be thinking about things and again reading history and anthropology books, which again I'm saying I haven't got any solid conclusion about the objective way human nature's meant to be, but books like Sex at Dawn, while rhetorical and not very well written, I think have some really good, compelling points about human nature and how much it's repressed.
Excellent. You think it's opened your mindset to be less possessive then?
Opened my mindset. I think that's part of a emotional awareness practice. And again, part of, as I said, the subcultures and people you're around. Again, we're just going to be... There's not many people in the middle of conservative Pakistan, that would be very accepting or, emotionally liberal, because we take on what's happening around us a lot.
Definitely. Okay, cool. And on the subject of the French polyamorous couple, you told me a really interesting story about the man wondering why the hell he's even trying to get rich. He's a bit of a serial entrepreneur.
That was a relevant, good one. Yeah, he worked his ass off and with the marriage and kids and had all these businesses and made lots of money, and we'd sit and have a beer in the evening and he'd look at me with envy all the time. And the first good preamble to mention is he said a lot of his rich friends really enjoy their money and they like having all their luxuries. But he said his problem was he didn't know how to enjoy it in his case. And he wishes, in his words, that he could be the beach ruster bum again. And he told me the story about when he was a teenager in Italy, and he said everyone was, after the war or something, everyone was pretty hungry and there was no work or anything, and he, with envy and nostalgia in his eyes, he told me about they were so hungry they ran outside and caught a cat and they boiled it and they ate it, and it never tasted so good because they were so hungry and they appreciate it. And he said now he doesn't appreciate shit anymore. And it's just funny that he really wanted to tell me about that and how good that cat was. And again, maybe his friends really enjoy the caviar and that's all good, but it just gave me a different perspective to always think of, well, in the back of your mind, the worst case scenario, if you had to go and boil the cat. Part of you would enjoy it in some different new way if you were really hungry that you might in future be nostalgic about.
Yeah, it's mental. I'd still like to know some more specifics around what they did with that cat in terms of how to cook it. Like, did you just boil it in a pan? I guess they skinned it.
Yes, they skinned it.
Spices and things.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a stew. Either way, it's pretty fucked up. But I mean, they're more fucked up than the fact that we eat every other animal on the planet. Well,
there you go.
A certain segment of animals on the planet.
There you go. And we should experience
maybe
killing the animals we're going to eat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Why should it be?
Definitely. Why is a pig any more acceptable to eat than a dog? One's cute and fluffy, but they still have minds and things.
Mm.
Anyway, that's another deep conversation. But on the subject of having and having not and comparing yourself and being happy, you just told me about a book that I've forgotten, so I wanted to ask you about it anyway, just because it sounded awesome. About humans these days being less happy because they compare themselves to like CEOs, millionaires.
Oh yeah, the pretty famous author Alexander Bouton, and his most famous book, Status Anxiety. It's sort of again one of these books that it's not that much of a revelation. You probably already realised these fundamentals before, but he just talks about through history how societal attitudes changed around the justification and morality of being relatively wealthy or poor, and that it went maybe from early Christianity espousing that Jesus was poor and the poor would inherit the earth and the rich were wicked and there was no justification for their position. And then maybe transforming after Napoleon to more of a supposed meritocracy where people were justified in their positions. And he says that in turn, through the justification and the at least illusion of a complete meritocracy, as is maybe more the case in America, there's also an implied degradation for the poor people because it's probably your own fault. And in reality, we can't all be the CEO. And even though social media and Anthony Robbins and everyone's telling you have the right to be Superman, you know, it's all relative, and we can't all relatively be Superman to everyone else. And in comparison, maybe the pauper in Europe was more satisfied in one respect, he says, because all his peers were 90% all in the same position. He wasn't constantly striving and dreaming, even though, you know, his life was malnutritioned and horrible in many respects.
Yeah, I think when you haven't got stuff to compare yourself to, you can be a lot more content. And then even in your own life, you remember when you're younger, you just didn't have certain things, but that was fine. And now suddenly you're just used to the smartphone. If you haven't got a smartphone in the city, you feel like inept, and what can you do?
Yeah, it's a really good book.
Yeah, it sounds super fascinating. I'm pretty excited to read it. And yeah, I definitely noticed, well, I was never a student 30 years ago to know what people came out like after that, but a lot of my friends have done university with some kind of vague life goal, but not really knowing what they want to achieve. And then they kind of get a bit lost, sort of like 3 years later, they still don't really know, like they're not in a job that defines them or that they want to do for the rest of their life. They don't know how to be an entrepreneur and save the world, and that's all they really get to see on social media, and so they just feel a bit shit about everything and lost. And kind of a confusing place to find yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
But it seems like so many people have that now these days. And just, you know,
yeah, maybe
50
part
years
of the
ago wasn't such a
pain,
problem.
part of the disappointment is that, yeah, it's sold to you so much to be something else. Again, the average pauper just wasn't dreaming. There's even that discrepancy in statistics you read about, I read in The Economist, how many people in the US expect that within the next 10 years they're going to be, you know, super rich and doing what they love. And it's a really high proportion relative to how many are actually going to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that belief is what keeps such systems that espouse to be meritocracies going when, in many respects, they're not.
Yeah, definitely. I was, before Christmas, I was staying with some friends, and the daughter, she's like 13, 14. She's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a billionaire. I'm like, okay, how are you going to do that? I don't know, I'm just going to be a billionaire, like...
Setting up for a lot of disappointment.
Yeah, it just looks at me like I'm stupid because I'm nearly 30 and I'm not a billionaire yet. And I'm like, I'm doing pretty well for myself, actually, you know. You could probably learn a thing, or maybe two, from me.
I don't think there were many 13-year-olds a few generations ago with his expectations.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, what do you like doing? Oh, I don't really like doing much. Okay, good. How are you going to sell that? Or you don't like work. Like, there's got to be a step in between doing nothing and ultimate having everything. It's funny. But yeah, anyway, on that note, yeah, probably a good time to start wrapping up. Anything you want to challenge me on or ask or bring up?
Maybe relevant to mention if people know you, how you seemingly so easily and intently adjusted into that radically different environment in Rainbow. I was concerned. I had challenges the first times coming in. I was wondering if you and Andreas would be at ease in there and able to enjoy it. And what challenges were there? Surely there was something that was a bit uncomfortable or different or critical.
I guess I do like being specific about my food, and there was a bit of a challenge. On the first few days, there wasn't so much food around as well, and it was a bit like, oh shit, I haven't got enough, and trying to go back for seconds and not being allowed it, and being like, shit, this is not fair. And depends on where you sit, maybe you get seconds, maybe you don't, and it was like, this is annoying. But otherwise, I didn't find it too difficult. Like you said, you didn't like the singing before eating and stuff. Well, I was in an African choir for a bit, where we'd meet at like 7 o'clock and sing for 2 or 3 hours, and then we'd eat. So it's kind of a tradition that I literally already already had in that sense. And I did kind of like doing yoga, and I was ready for a bit of a break in terms of having more time to myself to practice some things. And I guess, like you said at one point, Rainbow is kind of like a holiday for people already on holiday or traveling. And it was very nice when you've been going around the world and trying to plan where you're going next and trying to plan meeting people and organize stuff, to suddenly be in an environment where you don't have to do anything like that. You have your tent. When you feel like being in your tent, you're in your tent. Otherwise, you just out and there's people, and at dinner time there's dinner. If you want to go to a workshop, you go to a workshop. If you want to go in the river, you go in the river. If you want to play guitar, you play guitar by yourself. If you want to play it with other people, there's someone playing guitar, so you go join them. And it was quite nice to just not think about moving or packing my bag or unpacking my bag or any of that stuff.
It's very relevant to mention in the context of people's evolution of what they're seeking for when they're traveling. The transition from every individual things, from excitement to boredom, and re-questioning what you want and what you're looking for going around the world. For me, Rainbow was a bit of a milestone in that evolution. Where a couple of years ago I was traveling around Europe, having some interesting cultural experiences and keeping up a few sustained activities and challenges, but I got largely inevitably bored of going in and out of big cities and going
100%.
to a hostel, and every time again I'm looking for a park on Google Maps, hopefully do some exercise and meet some people and maybe play music and read in a park. And then I got to Rainbow in Europe after being in music festivals and cities and hostels and staying with friends, and it just all of a sudden made so much more sense. Inevitably traveling, the rush of taking a picture with the big building or whatever will wear off, and you want some more fundamental things that probably involve some human connection and nature and freedom and space and meaning, and that totally provided it. Like, I was totally over going to the couple of psytrance music festivals, drug taking, because that gets shallow as well and you can't connect to people on deeper levels, and I was tired of running around and getting buses, and absolutely what I wanted was to stay in one place for 1 month and connect with people and develop music and reading and yoga and enjoying nature. And so it's a perfect gap in between traveling to not run around. And what I realized, and it brought me in some beautiful full circle, there was people in these Portugal and Japanese rainbows on the other side of the world talking about how good the Tasmanian rainbow is. And then you realize as well, I know the things I want, the tangible things of nature and people and connection and blah blah blah. Well, I could be having it in Tasmania. There's all international people, the same people in these different ones around the world. Is it necessary to fly across the world and have this fantastical idea of it being exotic when it's the same thing amongst maybe some different flora and fauna in Tasmania? Well, not really. And longer term in going to these things, I wanted to have the same people to see again in each rainbow and see afterwards. And that was so much more accessible right next to my home city. And I love doing it. There's no need to cross the world.
Definitely.
It's right there, people and nature and simple activities.
Cool. Oh, thanks, man. All right. Well, I think that's rainbow covered. Yay. And hopefully I'll see you at another rainbow at some point.
We will indeed.
So that's the interview with Felix over. Like I said, it was really great to catch up with him again and have him on the podcast. He is one of my favourite people, and I just learned so much from him last year. If you want to go to the original episode with him about his life and travels and business, like I said, it's one of my favourites, so do go back into the archive and listen to episode 14 with him if you enjoyed this episode. Listening back to this interview really reminded me how lucky I've been to travel the world over the last year, which sounds a bit silly because obviously it's a massive opportunity and lots of fun to do, but I guess I've been feeling a bit down that a whole year of travel has prevented me from developing my business ideas or coding skills further. And it's just been great to remind myself how much fun I had and how many other things I learned along the way. And to be fair, I did get a whole podcast up and running during that year, so I really haven't gone backwards at all. On that note, I would love to add just how grateful I am to all of you listeners. It really means a lot to me that you take time and listen to my podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. If you ever have any ideas for the show or you want to chat, I genuinely love talking to you guys, and it really makes my day if I ever get a message from you. So please do reach out. Anyway, I'm feeling a bit sentimental, so let's just move on to the top tips. Number 1, appreciate things. So the story of the rich, successful guy who just wants to go back to being a poor man on the street, I just found really insightful because he'd never tasted something quite as good as this skinny cat, which sounds quite disgusting, but because he was so hungry for it and so appreciative of it in the moment, he said it's one of the best experiences of his life. But if you could just culture a better appreciation of everything around you, then that really is the key to being happier in life, and you don't have to go and live on the street and eat cats to be happy. So yeah, just be appreciative. Practicing things like a gratitude journal can really help if you want to just start noticing more things in your life to appreciate. And that would be my first place to start. Number 2, rainbow gatherings are a great launch pad for travel. So when you want to visit a new country and really learn about it and meet people and have like real proper experiences, it's just very, very hard to do that these days as a tourist, going to a new city and trying to engage people, and there's just so many other tourists around and you just get stuck in like the tourist loop. But if you go to a rainbow gathering in the country, it's just a perfect way to meet actual locals and understand what life really is like in their history and the current times and the culture. And you just get an awful lot of inspiration and tips for cool things to go and do in that country. And importantly, lots of invites to go and visit people who are now your friends and do fun stuff together, which is amazing. And if you see an event happening in any country that you've wanted to visit, it's literally just the best place to start, hands down. And furthermore, it's free. And then any invites you get to go and stay with people is also more free accommodation. So if you want to go to a country that's expensive, it just makes so much sense. Number 3, smile more. So I can't really explain just how nice it was being in a group of people who all smile at you as you walk along. And every day I just walked kind of lightly on my feet thanks to everyone being so nice all the time. It's something that I've really enjoyed now practicing out and about since. So maybe half the people that I smile at look away before they really get the chance to respond and they don't engage. But genuinely, a lot of people might be surprised or they smile back instantly. And I feel like I've made a connection. And some people even get a high five from for no real reason, but it's just awesome. And if you go about your day assuming that everyone will be nicer if you smile at them, you can actually make it happen. And it's just really nice to do. So now moving on to books. We didn't discuss a lot of books in this episode, but Felix did mention Sex at Dawn as a really interesting read. And so yeah, why not? Sounds good. Then another recommendation I've now had is that Somewhere Under the Rainbow by Tom Thumb is a really good book. It's well reviewed about his experiences at rainbow gatherings, and it's been described as a great way for those who haven't been to a rainbow gathering to learn about it, and for those that have been to reminisce and remember what they valued. So these are the things that I hope I achieved with this podcast, but if you want to know more or remember more, then this book seems to be the place to go.
Actually, I've got a bit ahead of myself. We did talk about one book, Status Anxiety by Elaine de Botton. It sounds like a really fascinating read on how status affects the way we are treated by others and just general dilemmas we face trying to acquire status from businesses or social media, and how we can overcome this massive anxiety that we have. And we're just generally increasingly developing this anxiety, and by overcoming it we can end up being happier and more chilled out people. Yeah, this is something I've actually been meaning to write up a blog and a podcast on, because my thoughts of this general area is that like the increasing issues of social media just creates a vision of perfectness in everyone else's lives around you, which ends up with you feeling just generally inept. Like there's all these things that you should be doing that you aren't doing. And so this sounds like the book is right down my street, and perhaps you too.
And now that's basically the end of the episode. If you want to find out more about rainbow gatherings and how to actually join in on one and the right kind of links and all that stuff, then this will be in the show notes. So please visit the website growthmindsetpodcast.com to get information. Or like I said, feel free to reach out to me and I can point you in the right directions. And that's not a problem. It is honestly a joy to talk to you all.
Now, I have one final thing to address. I have just learned how to find my podcast reviews in different countries, and up till now I've only been able to see the ones in the UK. But it turns out that people in America have actually been reviewing me as well, and I had no idea. So that's amazing. Thanks guys so much. But a few weeks ago I released a series of episodes that had the sound completely screwed up, like super mega awful weird. There's like whirring and crazy crap going on. And instead of anyone sending me a tweet, turns out I actually received a few bad reviews about the sound, which is completely fair play because it was terrible, and I have now fixed it. And I should have listened to it once it had been uploaded, which I now obviously do every time.
Now that I have fixed the episode, it would be great if those reviews could maybe be amended, because if it sort of makes my podcast reviews look not so good as they could be. But no worries if not, it's my fault. Anyway, if my sound in general is just too bad, do let me know by Twitter so I can try and fix it. And I have just purchased a new pair of interviewing mics and some better software to help improve the sound in general, because now I have quite a lot of listeners beyond just my mum. I probably need to sort this all out. In general, if there's any form of issue at all with the podcast, just let me know, because I've been doing this by myself and I put a lot of hours into every single episode. So I'd hate for that to be wasted on you guys by just some small random glitch, making it seem like I just don't care about it and put up any old content, because seriously, I do care about it and put a lot of effort into this stuff. So I'm sorry when mistakes happen and really would like to correct them. And on that note, the podcast is over. If all goes to plan, next week I'll be releasing my first podcast from my experiences in North Korea, where I interview my tour guide there, and that was a hugely insightful interview. So anyone wanting to know more about North Korea or dark tourism in general, stay tuned till next week. You've listened to an episode of the Growth Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe on your preferred app and give me a good rating. If you are unable to give good feedback right now, try sharing the show with a friend who will, or just wait for the show to improve. If you have any ideas for the show or you just want to reach out, I'd love to talk to you. On Twitter, I am at Sam Harris Tweets, or Instagram, SamJamSnaps. Show notes, along with links to everything that we discuss, are available at growthmindsetpodcast.com, along with information on how to get involved and blog posts on cool things that you should be aware of. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy your next podcast.